Thanks very much. Right, and here we go.
Nice one.
Excellent. And we are now live for today's webinar with the Very Group. Thank you to all of the early birds for getting here on time. We will just give it a few minutes, obviously, just for the call to fill up. We don't want to be getting into some of the great content that the Very Group has prepared for us before everyone is here to kind of listen to it. Just to intro the title of today's webinar, we're looking at modernising the technology behind the Very Group. And we've got three fantastic speakers from the Very Group. There will be a Q&A section at the end as well. So if anything that they do say piques your interest, please do get questions in as we're going through the presentation. Just on the question side of things, please use the Q&A feature rather than raising your hands. We won't be able to stop and get round to raised hands during the presentations. However, if you do use the Q&A feature, that'll be logged. We can then respond during the Q&A section, or if we don't get round to it, we will have those questions logged where we can follow up via email afterwards, and we'll follow up with an email with lots of useful links relating to anything that has been discussed on today's webinar. So first things first, hackajob is a data-driven and engaging recruitment platform operating in the digital sector. We use key data points to find candidates' jobs uniquely based on their CV and skill sets, ensuring both candidates and companies can conduct a more relevant and targeted approach to recruitment. Beyond that, we offer support before and after interviews, as well as offering candidates the opportunity to show off their skills through coding challenges and project uploads. But that's enough about hackajob. As I said, today we're joined by the Very Group. So at the Very Group, technology has played a huge part in helping them transition from a catalogue retailer to the UK's largest integrated online retailer and financial services provider over the last century. But their transformation is far from over. They're on an exciting journey to transform their technology estate and create even better experiences for their customers. They're doing that by modernising their existing systems and platforms, utilising a wider variety of modern cloud-based technologies. And as mentioned, yeah, we're joined by three fantastic speakers from the Very Group today. So we're joined by Neil Memmott, who is the Head of Technology. We're joined by Franck Schmidlin, who's a Senior Solutions Architect, and Paul Grove, who is a Senior Engineering Manager. Just a very quick reminder again for anyone who's joined a little bit later, please do not use the raised hands feature, but we do very much encourage you to use the Q&A feature. Any questions you have as we're going through the presentations, please log them there. We'll get to them at the Q&A section at the end. We've got about 10-15 minutes at the end, sectioned off for questions and answers. And anything we don't get round to, keep an eye on your emails. We will endeavour to follow up with an email with any questions that we didn't get round to, as well as lots of useful links and information related to today's talk. But that's more than enough from me. Let's get into the interesting stuff. So I'm going to hand over to Neil now, who's going to take you through the first presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Phil. And really just very happy to be here today to share with you what is a very exciting programme of work we're doing at the Very Group. Probably one of the most ambitious programmes of work that's happening, certainly in the northwest of England right now. And really pleased that we can take you through that. And really out of this, we are looking for people to come and help us. So be great to, off the back of this, if you're interested to get in touch with us. So as Phil said, I'm Neil Memmott, Head of Technology, specifically for our digital customer experience. So although we're doing a large digital transformation across our group, and we'll touch on that at a high level, today we're going to then go in a bit deeper into what we're doing with our digital customer experience. And by that, what I mean is transformation of our digital front door, which is, we have 3 websites and a mobile application. So I think just first of all, for those people who are not familiar with who we are, just touch on a little bit about who the Very Group are, and also just look at it in terms of the Very Group in numbers, which we'll do on the next slide. So who's the Very Group? We are the UK and Ireland's largest integrated digital retailer and financial services provider, existing to making good things easily accessible to more people. So what does that mean? What it means is that we are a multi-category retail store, online retail store. So we're a pure digital retail store, and we'll talk about our history of how we've got to that shortly. And we offer over or just close to 2,000 different brands across our store. And that's everything from games consoles to trainers. And then we offer a variety of ways to spread the cost of payment for that, from straight cash payment to various interest-free or installment payments to spread the cost. In terms of our culture, we've got a very strong culture at the very group, and we describe that in terms of trusting people to do their work, being ambitious in what we're trying to achieve, and you'll see that in the slides today, how ambitious we are, being proud of what we've achieved, and we've got a really strong heritage in terms of what we've achieved. Driving innovation, which is really one of the key things that's of purposes of our transformation, and working together in small empowered teams. So in terms of numbers, just to give you a kind of a flavor of the scale of our operation, is that we have 4 million active customers that we serve. And we generate just over 2 billion of revenue per annum. As I mentioned before, we sell just under 2,000 different types of well-known brands across our website. We have over 10 million people that come and visit us each week, or 1.9 million per day, and 4,500 colleagues who work for us. And of those 4,500, about 450 work within technology, just to give you an idea of how technology fits within the organization. So in terms of then where have we come from, then just in terms of history, we've actually been around for well over 100 years, which is quite phenomenal when you think about it. And we've been through many, many business transformations during that period of time, right from selling through catalogues, which is probably what people most recognize us from, through to selling through stores, brick and mortar, through to people ringing up and placing orders through telesales, our telesales department. And then obviously more recently in our history through websites and applications. And really today is that we don't have catalogues and stores and do a small amount of transaction through telesales. We are a pure digital player now. And we do that through 3 brands. So there is Littlewoods Ireland, but our biggest and largest brand is veryco.uk. But the interesting thing, I think, is that in all of that business transformation, we've really adapted our technology to support the business through that. And that is now actually creating us problems as we've almost twisted and evolved our technology to achieve that transformation. So the reality is that some of our technology is extremely old, right? So some of our systems date back 38 years. And actually the impact of that is that, and really what's driving us in terms of modernization is it's now got to a point where the IT estate is very inflexible and very difficult to change and really quite unsustainable now. We have some systems where really there is one person who comes out of retirement to make a code change. Some of it is that old. And obviously that's a serious risk. It's a risk to the operational of the business. A £2 billion business that needs to get someone out of retirement to make a change is unsustainable. It's also really in today and in today's fast moving digital world, we need to have much higher velocity and ability to innovate in order to maintain competitiveness and live for at least another 100 years. So really what we're embarking on, and we've been embarking on it for about the last 6 months or so, is a significant transformation of our technology to really rebuild it from the ground up for a digital world. And that's a significant investment over 3 years. And how we illustrate it certainly to our business colleagues, because software can feel a little bit intangible, is that we've been doing a similar transformation with our distribution centres, where we've had quite old distribution centres with a lot of people manually picking goods to pack them to send them out to customers, and we've been transforming those into modern robotic distribution centres in the East Midlands. So in a way, it's a similar transformation that we are doing for the business in the software arena. And in terms of how we're thinking about what we are describing the transformation and what we're trying to achieve by that, if we think about technology and how it supports our customers, our colleagues, and our business, and we think about it in terms of a hierarchy of needs. At its base, we need our technology to be compliant and secure. We are a financially services regulated business because of the credit we offer our customers, and we need to make sure that we protect our customer information and we are compliant to regulation. We then need to make sure that the technology is super stable. So we go through large periods of peak traffic, particularly around Black Friday or large product releases, and we need to be able to handle that peak of traffic. But then we also need to now be able to change our technology at a much higher rate, so increase the velocity of change, and then through that also then drive greater innovation and the experience we give our customers. And today, and what we've learned over time, is we are super great at the first two areas, compliance and stability. In fact, I think we came and talked at hackajob before Christmas about how we deal with peak traffic through our Black Friday. There's a graph in the middle there about just trying to illustrate the tremendous growth we get, particularly during November and December period that we need to prepare ourselves for. And earlier in the days of Black Friday, when it became a thing, we had a lot of instability and website outage. But thankful to say that really over the last few years, we've had a very stable experience for our customer. And that also translates into big product launches like games consoles, where we're able to handle that peak traffic where some of our other competitors have struggled. But where we're great on compliance and stability, we are poor on velocity and innovation, and that is what we're seeking to address now through this transformation. So how we're tackling that is about three areas, really. It's about people and about organizing ourselves into small focused teams that we can, and removing the dependencies on those teams so that they can operate independently. It's about driving the skills and capabilities to enable us to release software frequently and on a daily basis. And it's about moving our technology to the cloud and building an evolutionary architecture. So I'm going to touch a little bit in these areas, but Franck is going to go into more detail on the technology side, and Paul is going to go into more detail on the people side. So in terms of the people side, what we have done over the last 18 months to 2 years is organized ourselves into a tribe and squad model, not dissimilar to other technology organizations that have latched on to what Spotify did many years ago. And we have tribes that are organized around business domains. So we are in the digital customer experience tribe, which is about the digital front door. That's the three of us are from that area. We look after the customer experience on web and mobile. We have a retail tribe that is responsible for acquiring product, bringing product into our distribution centers and making it available for presentation on the websites. We have a financial services tribe that is responsible for our different flexible ways of paying and ensuring that we do that in a responsible way. We have a customer care tribe that is responsible for providing ways in which our customers can contact us. And then a logistics and fulfillment tribe that manages those distribution centers and ships out product to customers and handles returns. Underpinning that, we're doing more and more with data and insight, and we want to to go even more with that during transformation to build more personalized experiences. And then we have a tech ops tribe that is supporting our movement into cloud, for which we're using AWS as our partner for that. In terms of, I'm diving specifically into DCX, but it's not dissimilar to other tribes, but we are split into cross-functional product engineering squads, again, as is the norm in a modern tech organization, where we bring product management, business analysis, delivery, and engineering together. And our squads in DCX are based around parts of the customer journey, from how we onboard our customers, to how our customers discover or search for product, for how they then understand their product and get detailed information about it to help them decide whether they want to purchase it, to then taking their basket through the checkout, and then being able to then self-serve and manage their account. And then we have a specific app squad for our iOS and Android experiences. And underpinning that is a team that manage the hosting environment for the websites. In terms of what we're then looking to do around our ways of working, today we work with fairly large batch sizes of work, and we deploy changes every 2 weeks. And in fact, almost embarrassingly to say, is that we have to take the website down for 6 hours every 2 weeks to do deployments, which is just almost too embarrassing to mention in today's digital world that we're seeking to address. And what we're trying to do is move our ways of working so that we can make changes multiple times every day. And to do that, we're looking at the following principles. The base principle of ensuring all code is reviewed, and by that we really mean that we expect teams to pair program or mob program to collectively understand the code and be comfortable about the changes we're making, to shift left on quality and security and bring that much earlier, that thinking much earlier in the software development lifecycle, to make sure we automate what is repeatable, so both our regression tests are automated, and that we automate our deployments to make change easier, that we build in resilience to failure. So as we move to a kind of a more distributed architecture, that the system can actually handle failure and degrade the customer experience safely and sensibly. And then also we are moving to squads maintaining the health of their systems. So moving to the culture of you build it, you run it, you look after it. We don't hand over the software to an operational team. So they're the main principles of change we're making in terms of how we're working. In terms of the technology, which Franck will go into in much greater detail, today our websites are powered by an Oracle Commerce platform, which is called ATG. It's over about 11 years old, so it's done us proud up to now. It's supported our phenomenal growth in the business, but really now it is end of life, and we're needing to make a transition away from it. And it's really past its sell-by date for us. It's being a monolithic system where the presentation layer, the business logic, and the capabilities are all released as a single code base. Not only is that causing us problems in terms of the fact we have to take the website down to make changes, but it's also quite becoming more and more problematic to change. It's been through a lot of customization. Making change is becoming more expensive, and also the skills, the people to work on this platform are becoming less and less, so it is becoming harder for us to find people to come and make changes to this platform. So many reasons why we need to move away from it. What we're moving away to is a modern Mac-based architecture. Franck will go into this in more detail, but Mac standing for Microservices, API, Cloud, and Headless. But in essence, it's a composable architecture for where we are buying in core capability from leading providers. So leading providers for content management, for which we are using Ampliance, core commerce engine, which is commerce tools, and we're going through a selection process for our new search engine. And we're building for uniqueness, where we want to innovate the experience, which is the front end. And those changes in terms of the people, the process, technology, then what we are expecting to get out of that transformation is significant improvement in speed to market. So being able to make changes multiple times a day, being able to keep the shop open whilst we make those changes, so effectively zero time downtime releases. And in the past, we've had code freezes through peak periods, and success to us is that we can be changing the website during peak traffic, that we're utilizing modern technology. Frank will talk about the technology that we're using in this space. Building with accessibility and design system at core. So our system, our website today is not responsive, and we have poor compliance to accessibility, which is really unacceptable again. And we want to make sure we're at least AA compliant in our change. And that where the modular architecture will allow us to be much more innovative, think of different ways in which we can build more creative experiences and do that in a much faster way to our customers. So giving that and that ability to innovate, we are hoping we'll be able to then innovate the experience around providing much more personalized, contextual, relevant journeys to our customers, providing much easier and inspirational product discovery experiences, richer category-specific product experiences. We have a single experience for all product categories, and we want to provide richer experiences for different product categories, powerful self-serve capability, and then a modern onboarding journey. That's what we then hope that the transformation will enable us to start to innovate around. So just finally from me then, so hopefully then you can see therefore that building on what we're good at today, which is around compliance and stability, that this change will then start to help us drive much greater velocity of change, and through that much more innovative customer experiences. So I'm now going to hand over to Franck, who's going to now talk tech.
So yes, hi everyone. I'm Franck Schmidlin. I'm one of the solution architects in the DCX tribe. I'm going to pick up the presentation from one of the Neil earlier slide. Also, I realized that he's removed the spaghetti from his, but basically he was supposed to talk about the spaghetti logic that is plaguing us. And the cause of that spaghetti logic is that monolith that Neil mentioned. And when you develop on a monolithic platform, because of the shared code base, and because you have one big system trying to deal with every single problem you're trying to address, you end up with having intermingled logic, spaghetti logic, and you become afraid of changing one area of your solution without impacting other area of the solution. So we need to move away from our Oracle platform because it's coming end of life, but we want to move away from this monolithic type of architecture. We going to inspire ourselves from the philosophers of ancient Greece, who looked at the ship of King Theseus and wonder if you could take that huge, magnificent ship and replace one plank, and yes, another plank, and keep on replacing plank after plank for 1,000 years, whether that ship remained the famous ship of King Theseus. And putting aside the philosophy behind it, we're going to inspire ourselves from that methodology. We're going to break a monolith down into individual planks that we can replace and re-implement bit by bit without our customers being aware of the change. Unfortunately, we don't have 1,000 years to achieve that. We got about 3. So it's a thing. So we need to move something from that monolith, but by definition, a monolith is not made of individual component. It's one big thing. So we need to break it down, but it's not as easy as simply pull a component and replace it. We need to identify a logically independent area of the solution that we can re-implement individually, separately from each other, ideally in parallel, without impacting other area of the system. So one way we can slice a monolith is along those journeys that Neil mentioned earlier. The logic and the screen and the presentation layer that we use to onboard a customer is quite different from the logic we use to discover a product. So as we re-implement away from the monolith, we can be comfortable that if we implement those areas separately, we won't thread on each other's toe. We can also slice along the architecture layers through the monolith. The front end, the back end, the business logic, again, logically are distinct from each other. They might not be on the monolith. That's the source of our problem. We might have a shared code base, but as we move away from it, we should be able to re-implement those areas of the monolith independently from each other. And finally, we're going to apply what's known as domain-driven design, as documented by a guy called Eric Evans. So I recommend the bottom book, the red book is much better implementing domain-driven design. Put succinctly, domain-driven design is about looking at your huge problem, all the problem that your organization is trying to deal with, and try to identify individual problem within that big problem, to find areas of concern where you can draw a nice line on a whiteboard and clearly say, when we talk about X belongs within that problem, and when we talk about why it doesn't. So instead of trying to look at the entire problem of your organization, you break it down into small individual problems with clearly defined boundaries. And then you organize those problems along 3 types of subdomain. You look at your core domain, the thing that is very specific to you as an organization, the things that differentiate you from your competitors, your bread and butter, your unique selling point. That's what you want to be doing. This is where you want to put your effort, your brain cell, your energy. And at the other end, you've got generic subdomain, things that you need to do them well, but in no way do they differentiate you from your competitors. In many ways, you're better off entrusting other organizations to treat those generic subdomain as their core domain and let them specialize in solving those problems and then consume their solution to those problems. Everybody has to be good at something. You decide that other companies are better at dealing with those problems. And then in between, you've got something called supporting subdomains, things that are important to what you're trying to achieve, but not directly. So you need to do them in order to meet your core requirement, but in themselves, they don't make you money or don't differentiate you. So here at Very, what's core to our business is those customer experience, the way we want to take our customers through our product offerings, through our financial offering, those frictionless shopping experience, the pink user interface, all those things that differentiate us from other e-commerce retailers. Underneath that, we're doing a lot of things that everybody else in retail has to do. We have a content management. We need a way to manage the images and the text we display on our website. We need the ability to search, typing a few keywords and finding the exact product that you're trying to buy for your wife. And we need also components of e-commerce, a product catalog, a shopping cart, a wish list, all these things. They're very important to what we're trying to do, but we don't really want to reinvent those wheels. We're much better off entrusting other companies to give us solutions to those problems and incorporate those solutions in our architecture. And then an example of supporting subdomain would be like experimentation and personalization. They are very important to what we're trying to achieve as an organization, but in themselves, our customers don't care. So we need to do them well in order to provide those experiences that we want to provide, but in themselves they're not. So they count as supporting subdomain. How do we replace the plank of our very ship? So if we're going to re-implement those areas of logic that we've identified one by one, are we going to incorporate them into our offering to the customers without the customer being aware of the change? We're going to follow the Strangler-Fig pattern. Very simplistically, you incorporate a facade component between your consumer and your monolithic component. And that facade to the outside world will look exactly like the monolith. So the outside world won't be aware of what's going on below the facade. And as you start re-implementing areas of your monolith on brand new shiny tech, you hide that brand new shiny tech behind the facade. You entrust the facade to start shunting traffic and requests to the new tech. And as we implement more and more of that new tech, as we replace more and more planks of our ship, you shunt more and more traffic to it and away from the monolith, until lo and behold, one day, hopefully before the 3 years deadline, we will have replaced everything below behind the facade, and we'll get rid of the facade, and the entire offering will be on brand new tech. Are we going to organize this brand new tech? So we, as I said, we want to move away from this monolithic architecture. We want to a composable architecture. So we're going to target what in retail is called the MAC architecture, which stands for Microservices, API, Cloud Native, and Headless. The acronym is very specific to retail, but the architecture would apply to any industry where you're architecting a modern application facing serving customers. Microservices, you will know the term, but basically they are the physical representation of those bounded contexts I've mentioned earlier. If you've identified specific problem with nicely drawn boundaries around those problems, you can start implementing individual application that deal with those problems and only just those problems. Instead of one big monolithic solution trying to deal with every single problem on in your domain, you implement individual solution, truly independent application. You treat them as a completely separate application. They've got their own squad, their own dashboard, their own SLA. They might run on their own infrastructure. They've got completely different technologies if you require, whatever is required to meet and solve that specific problem. And this will enable that innovation and that velocity we're looking for, because now you're dealing with individual problem on individual application. You can modify and deploy and do whatever you want with those applications without worrying about the other problem in your domain. You're truly independent, and you can start developing in parallel and accelerate your transformation. For them to be truly independent, microservices have to communicate with the APIs or event. So APIs or event basically is two services agreeing on a contract as to how they're going to communicate. The contract is going to cover the communication protocol, the error mechanism, but the schema of the data, the content of the data, everything becomes part of the contract, gets agreed between the two sides, and then the two sides can go their own way and implement their solution to that contract. They don't care about the implementation behind the contract. So now again, the two applications remain independent. There's no dependency on technology or implementation, database, nothing. As long as they both meet their side of the contract, it will work. That's the idea. APIs at runtime is one component calling into another component, which creates a runtime dependency. The two sides of the equation, the two sides of the contract must be there for the communication to succeed. A much better way, much more, if you can architect that way, is to use events. Event is the component with the data will fire that data into the ether, well, into your architecture, and not worry as to whether somebody is there to consume that data. And then services that require that data will consume it again out of the architecture as and when they need to, without worrying about when it was created and who by. Which means now the two sides of the contract can work independently from each other. You could almost have a event producing component, fire an event, and then die. And then a bit later, a consuming component consume that event, not worry that the source component is no longer there. They're truly independent, which means they're truly resilient. They can be scaled independently from each other. So event-driven architecture is where you want your architecture to move towards as much as possible. The C of Mac stands for cloud native. And by cloud native, you might have seen that visual before, which is everything that the cloud represents. With on the left-hand side, you've got the old days of on-premise, when organizations like ours would have their own data center, own servers, be in charge of physical security, air conditioning, electricity. And then the modern cloud, which on the right-hand side is what we call software as a service, where you consume capabilities, generic capabilities, as I described before, entirely as a service behind an API. You do not have to worry about how it is hosted or it is implemented, where it is. All you see is an API endpoint to which you send queries and receive data. That's the nirvana, software as a service. And in between, you've got all the capability of the cloud. And we want to be on the right-hand side of that diagram. We want to consume either, as I say, software as a service for our generic requirement, but where we build our own architecture, we're going to use things like platform as a service, value-added services provided by our cloud provider. So we use AWS, we're an AWS partner. And we're building architecture on components such as the API gateway. So if we need an API in front of a service, we use we don't build it ourselves. We configure API gateway to expose that API. Our event-driven architecture will use Event Bridge. Again, where all the plumbing of sending and receiving events is done through configuration. We don't have to write specific code for that. We concentrate on what is core to our problem. Step function, relatively modern offering from AWS, which allows you to orchestrate workflows through a set of component and microservices. You can say, okay, run that service and wait for it to come back. And when it comes back, depending on the answer, do X or Y. And then if X succeed, call A and B, wait for both A and B to succeed and push the data. And that kind of workflow where before you would have to write is a big if and then else statement or have an ESB or state machine somewhere can be achieved entirely through configuration of step function. You don't write the code for the plumbing. You only write the business logic that address your core problem. And then the like of Elasticache and DynamoDB, which are ways of storing data where you need it, without having to worry about the physical infrastructure aspect of hosting data, about clusters, about sharding, about encryption. All this is handled on our behalf by AWS through configuration. And we concentrate just on the data we need and why we need it. And where we build business logic, as much as possible, we're going to use function as a service, AWS Lambda. Again, that means that we concentrate on writing the business logic that address our core requirement. And everything that's involved in actually running a piece of code, invoking that piece of code, making sure there's enough unit of code running at any given time to handle traffic, making sure you stop running it when you don't need to. So once you pass peak, you don't spend money running compute you don't need. The security, the access control, all this is managed on our behalf by AWS through configuration. So for us, cloud native means that the right-hand side of that chart, value-added services. We will not buy a component that runs as a container on a cluster. We want to consume ready-made services without having to worry about the infrastructure. And finally, the edge of Mac, because you are composing an architecture of multiple components, you don't want any of those components to try to impose any user experience on your users. You want them to be completely headless, to only consist of data, not have any notion of where in the user experience they fit. And this is very important to us, because we want a core to our domain is that user experience. We want to provide a very experience. We want to meet those accessibility requirements. Therefore, we want to have full control of the presentation to our customers. We want to make the most use of native capabilities of mobile devices. We can only do that if our logic is in the native app, and the component we depend on are just pure APIs. We want to build virtual reality experiences on those devices and the web. We want to do a lot of machine learning personalization, where individual customers will see almost a different website based on prior use of the website or preferences. All this we can only build if we don't have to worry about the component we incorporate in our architecture, imposing it any sort of UI. So I don't have no idea where in time I am, but finally the slide I was supposed to give, which is the technology we use. So Neil has already mentioned Ampliance e-commerce tool, Mac compliant SaaS provider of very specialized in e-commerce. We partnered with them because they're very good at what they do. So that gives us the best retail-centered content management service, and the best composable e-commerce component we can get currently on the market, and AWS. So I've mentioned Lambda function, API gateway, all this to use those value-adding services and build architecture on top of this. And then where we write our code, where we build our core component, we're going to normalize on TypeScript. JavaScript, the typed version of JavaScript, which allows us to be full stack across the architecture. Wherever we build a piece of code, we will be able to use the same language, with the exception of apps where we use Kotlin and Swift, because we want to be able to leverage those native experience. And right now we don't believe the non-native ways of developing are good enough for at this level. Our web UI, we're using React, again, a JavaScript framework, but we're doing server-side rendered React. So we use like a Fastify to allow us to render those React component onto web pages before we serve them to our customer. Allows us to be very consistent in the experience we provide, regardless of the browser they use, and also allows the like of Google to find our content on our pages without having to worry about dynamic UI. We're big fan of Storybook, which is a UI development platform that allows you to compose your UI based off out of a component library. It allows to make sure if you need a button somewhere to use the same button that everybody, or create your own and make it available to others. Our microservice Node.js, no brainer. It's TypeScript and runs very well on AWS Lambda. Our APIs, we use Open API as a standard, and because we want to automate all our testing, we use the like of Supertest and Pact to do as much automated testing of those APIs as we deliver the software. And then the like of Lighthouse and Cypress, with very good framework to do end-to-end testing across the entire stack. Distributed architecture requires a lot of monitoring. You build it, you run it, you support it, means that you need to have a visibility of what's happening in your service, but across the entire service stack that led to the call that failed. Elastic have a fantastic offering now, not just log monitoring like they used to, but they do a lot of application performance monitoring, distributed tracing, but also real user management, where you start monitoring your user on the first click on the website. Instead of wondering how they got to the calls that caused a failure, you can see the interaction and how they got there. And then a lot of infrastructure as code. We use Terraform because we want to do not just our AWS infrastructure, but every other component we bring in, if they're configurable through APIs, we can build a Terraform provider or use a Terraform provider to develop and manage that infrastructure through code, not having to go through any user interface. And then the like of Fastlane, GitLab, Jenkins, all that tooling to provide this continuous integration and deployment and manage our releases. And that's me done, and I have no idea how long I spent. So up to you, Paul.
Thanks, Frank. I think we're doing good on time. Right, let me just share my screen. I hope everyone can see that. Cool. So you've seen Neil and Frank. They talked a lot about technology, but anyone who's worked in IT for any sort of period of time, you realise it's not just about technology. It's about the people and teams. I've been in some projects where the focus was just on technology and not the people and teams. And ultimately, that's failed, not because of technology, but how the teams have been organised around that proposed architecture and technology. So I'm going to talk through how we've the why and how we reorganised DCX and our delivery teams to set up for the success of our digital transformation. And a lot of thought has gone in, just as much as the thought's gone into the architecture, but also how and why we want to organise our team. So that's what I'm going to talk through now. Okay. So I said, it's not just about the technology, it's about the people. So what sort of things do we have to consider when we're thinking about the people? So what teams do we need for this delivery of this transformation? How do we organise the teams? How do the teams work to accelerate delivering value to our customer? End of the day, we're about delivering value to the customer and the business. It's not just about the tech. And do people have the skills needed for the transformation? As Frank's touched on, we're going through a monolithic Java application to a totally different based architecture, different tech. So how do we support our people transform into that tech stack as well? Luckily, Team Topologies to the rescue. So to help answer some of those questions, we referenced, amongst other things, a book called Team Topologies, which is a practical, step-by-step adaptive model for organizational design and team interactions. It was published in about 2019, and has quickly become sort of a de facto aid for helping design teams in technology organizations. And I'm just going to talk through some of the core ideas in that book. Again, we could probably spend a whole hour going through this book, so I'm going to try and whiz through some of these concepts as quick as possible, because I've got about 7 minutes left. So some of the core ideas of the book are team first approach. So what does that mean? So start with teams is the first effective means of software delivery. There are multiple aspects to consider in this. So team size, I think we've touched on it multiple times, well, how big are our teams? And you've heard of the pizza team. A lot of that is actually driven by a study by Robin Dunbar, who was an anthropologist, who proposed in the 1990s that primates, the size of social groups is driven, there's some key numbers that they adhere to, and then we scaled it up to the human brain. And these numbers are around 5 people is the limit of people with whom we can hold a close personal relationship and working memory. Then we have 15 people, which is about the limit of people of whom we can experience deep trust. And then 50 people, this is the limit of people who we can have mutual trust. And then around 150 is the limit of people whose capabilities we can even remember. How many people have been in a big company and you walk around the office and you haven't got a clue what they do, even if they work in your organization, because there's so many people, you can't keep track of everyone. So when scaling teams, therefore, it's really important to consciously limit the size of team groupings to these numbers. So 5 to 8 people for a team, you can flex that over periods, but that's roughly a number you want to aim for the technical team. 5 to 50 for a tribe, 50 to 150 for a tribe, a division 150 to 500, and those larger numbers in those bounds are where you've got high trust organizations. So, and with those small teams, you also get a high level of trust. Now, when we say lots of small teams, it doesn't mean that teams all need to be completely independent of one another. There can be interlocking levels within teams, within groups, departments, and tribes. The point is that for an individual team to be the most effective, it should have a focused remit that doesn't require more than 15 people. It's really about how we divide up that work and keep those teams focused on key areas and minimize those dependencies. And always never forget Brooks' law when you're working with teams. Adding new people to a team doesn't immediately increase capacity. So it's not just about shifting people around the board of an operating model. As you move people around, it has an impact on teams. And as I touched on before, we've got to minimize dependencies between teams. For a team to maximize the flow of change, we must limit handoffs and external dependencies. There's always going to be external dependencies, but we have to be very mindful and understand those, and understand which ones are good, which ones are bad, and continually trying to remove those. Team lifespan. We should use long-lived teams as standard, because I don't know if people's heard the forming, norming, and storming. That's the cycle teams go through when you start a new team, and that can take anything to 3 to 6 months for teams to form, to norm, and then actually start performing as a high-performing team. Cognitive load, which I will touch on when I limit that. There's different types and when I limit certain ones in the team. So Conway's law. So what do we have? So Conway's law basically says the structure of software will mirror the structure of your organization that built it. So as you saw from Franck, we want a composable, small services, distributed. So what does that mean for DCX? Well, that means we need small teams that match that architecture. If we have a big team that's all working on the same services, you end up with probably bigger services. It's going to be a headwind to realizing that architecture. So in DCX, you won't find any database team, any UI team, any middleware team. These are small cross-skilled teams that've got the skills to deliver front to back the services they need for their bounded context in our architecture. Cognitive load, I'll quickly go over this. Again, we said there's different types of cognitive load. There's good ones and bad ones. So intrinsic cognitive load, this is really aspects of the task and fundamentals in your problem space. An example is the programming language you use. So the better you get at using your programming language, it it's not a load on your brain. It's second nature. When you use an IDE as a program, you remember the key bindings, and if you change IDE, you're all over the place. So it's removing that intrinsic cognitive load, and that can be done by training, pairing with pair programming, hiring the right skills that you need in your organization. The next load, extraneous cognitive load. So that's the environment you work in. So example will be, how do we deploy our service? We built this lovely service. How do I deploy it? How do I get it in live? We really need to remove that from teams. We want to automate that and remove any superfluous tasks or commands that add little business value to the teams. You want to automate and remove those and make them easy for the teams. And that will then leave the final germane cognitive load. That's where we really want to focus teams, solving our business problems, letting them really tackle the issues we're trying to solve, not worrying about infrastructure, not worrying about what program language do we use, how do we actually code in that language. We want to solve business problems. The key types, team topology also defines some 4 key types and 3 interaction modes. And again, I'll quickly whiz through this and I'll show you how we've applied it into our teams in DCX. So we have streamlined teams. Now these teams are the main flow of business change. So as we've touched on before, they're the squads that are aligned with the user journey. Then we have a platform team. Now their job is to take that underlying platform, support the streamlined teams and make it as easy as possible to deploy business change onto that platform. And obviously, as Frank said, as we start to use more serverless services, there's less in terms of infrastructure build. It's more, how can we develop safely those services into AWS and provide the good best of breed CI/CD pipelines? How do we initialize testing? How do we do the monitoring, alerting easy? Building those services and working with teams to make those as best as possible so they can deliver, and removing that cognitive load for teams. And then we've got enabling teams. And as Frank said, we're using a lot of new technologies. So we're bringing in some enabling teams who are really the SMEs in that, and they will work closely facilitating and collaborating with the journey squads to help them understand that technology, understand how we're going to apply it in their specific use case of that journey, and then hopefully they can then run with and have the skills to use that technology and remove that dependency from the enabling team. And then we have a complicated subsystem team. Again, these are optional. This is where you do have a really complicated part of the system that you wouldn't expect all teams to have the skills to run and know about. But we have got one of those, and we'll touch on that in a minute. And then we have the interaction modes. Collaboration. Again, these will change over time. This is where teams will work closely together. X as a service. So think of more of a PaaS service. So if our platform team can build our tools and CI/CD pipelines well documented, easy to use, they should almost be taken off the shelf. We shouldn't have to sit with every team and explain to them how to use these things. So that's a sort of a low impact collaboration model, but it allows decoupling and teams to move faster. Then facilitating, this is where a team may come in and remove some impediments that a team doesn't really know how to move. And like I say, these will change over time as we become a bit more mature in some of the technologies and the ways of working. Team API is a very key one as well. So what is a team API? Like programming, it's a description and specification how a team should interact with each other internally and how other teams should interact with them. So essentially, this is information that's beneficial to the team itself, internal facing, and information for other teams and stakeholders. So things about some examples of what may make up a team API. It may be your roadmap, your definition of done, definition of really capturing the dependency you have on other teams, what teams depend on you, what services you own, how teams can interact with you. There's lots of things, but I think having those clearly defined between teams removes some of that friction of how teams can actually work together and understand what other teams are doing. And one key thing here we have to remember, as our skills and technology changes, teams will have to change. It's never set in stone, so always have to be conscious that as we rapidly change and the markets change, the customer expectations change, we have to adapt our teams. We've done a good team design now, but maybe in a year and a half's time, there may be things that are telling us that those teams are not quite right. It may be teams are slowing down the delivery. There's friction, there's too much stress in the teams because they're context switching or they're waiting on dependencies of other teams. We have to continue to be cognizant of that and monitor that and change our teams if that's happening. And then we have growing our people, as we touched on. This is not only a tech transformation, a lot of the people have got to change to new technologies. So how do we support our team? So we've got Udemy training we're offering. We have half a day a week for personal development. We have quarterly internal hackathons. We have communities of practice where we share people of the same skills or area focus will share knowledge across the teams. Then we have the wider tech forum in TVG where we share technology insights and things teams are working across the whole of TVG. I'm just conscious of time. So this is based on a team topology. This is how we structured our teams in more detail. So as you can see, we have the streamlined squads vertically there, and we have the app team, and then we have in the purple, we have our enabling teams. We have some transient teams as we adopt new technology, ampliance, commerce tools, and then as over time they would be embedded into the squads. And we also have the platform team, and where I touched on the complex system team, we have our existing ATG platform. There are some real people have some real good skills that are running that platform and running that system. They are owning that system now, and that will keep the squads away from being distracted, trying to build into that system and focus on their transformation. And then we have some, we call them CTI squads. So we still got to support the business change as we change across our technology. The business still wants to deliver change from other parts of the business. So they're almost small focus project teams that are developing on ATG predominantly at the moment, but they are also building out some new tech in some transitional states as we do that migration. So how are we doing so far? So we've designed our teams. We've started to migrate to those teams. We've adopted a team first approach for those teams. They're small, persistent. We're trying to limit handoffs to deliver change. We're constantly looking at those dependencies and removing them. We're providing the training for our staff to move to this new Mac architecture, AWS serverless. We're ready to accelerate our transformation. The journey will be challenging with lots to learn. I think that's key there. This is a big challenge, and being on this journey, you're going to learn lots. It will be fun. It will be rewarding. So who's up for the challenge? Come join DCX. We have a lot of roles in TVG, but just to call out our DCX roles here, we're looking for full stack engineers, like say, who love to code back end and front end, React, TypeScript, Node.js. Bonus if you know AWS and serverless services. We're looking for some key backend engineers who have a passion for crafting resilient APIs and event-based services in AWS with those serverless architectures, and platform engineers also have a passion for infrastructure as code, automation, and working with developers to allow them to continue to deliver business safely on AWS. That's me done. Thank you. I haven't got much time left, but I blame Neil for that one.
No, I think that they were fantastic presentations. So yes, unfortunately, we aren't going to have any time for the Q&A. But I think, look, there was so much amazing content in there. I think a lot of the questions, luckily, that did come in have been answered by one of our three fantastic speakers today. I'm sure there was loads of great content in there that's really piqued everyone's interest. So as mentioned, keep an eye on your emails. We will follow up with any links that are relevant in terms of how you can get in touch with Very Group. Obviously, you can sign up to hackajob in order to be matched up to them, but we will make sure we include any of the content that's going to be relevant to today's webinar. And of course, answer any questions that were submitted that we unfortunately are not going to get the time to get around to. So just before I thank all of our speakers, just a quick reminder that in June, we have the DevLab conference coming up. So DevLab is our flagship software engineering conference, returning for a second year for 2 days after a hugely successful event last year. DevLab will be held on the 29th and 30th of June, online via Hopin, where you'll be able to see some amazing talks from all corners of the technology world, including Azure specialist and Tech Corner founder, Hosanna Halley. neurodiversity advocate and DevOps engineer Jennifer Opal, and robotics expert and YouTuber James Bruton. So don't delay, head over to our social media to sign up. But yeah, just wanted to really thank Neil, Frank, and Paul for some fantastic talks today. Some really, really good content about Very Group, and I'm sure there's lots of you out there fascinated and wanting to find out a little bit more about the impact you could have at such a great brand. So thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks all.